Hey, this is Daniel Holcomb. How are you?
Good. How you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing really good. Actually, I don't know if I need to give my full name. It's been a while since I've called on here. I called, like months ago, but I've been so busy with work. Haven't really listened to the show live for a while. But I had a couple of things. Well, actually, I had one thing I wanted to call in about yesterday regarding the Tea Party discussion you guys had yesterday. After hearing you talk about the Creation Museum, I kind of had a thought about that as well. So I grew up in a conservative Christian family, right? And for a while, I actually got into Answers in Genesis stuff years ago when I was still conservative, relatively conservative anyway, and creationist. So it's ironic, really, because they had suggested that you should study to show yourself approved, that sort of thing. And that was exactly what eventually moved me away from Christianity and away from, creationism. So
wait, what was wait. So hold on, Dan. So it was study that actually moved you away from Christianity.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was a very study that they suggested on their website that you do that eventually moved me away from that. Because as I started studying, it's always like the old saying, if you want to become an atheist, pick up a Bible.
Right. There you go. It's sort of like The Chosen. I don't know if you ever saw that movie with Robbie Benson or read that book, but that's interesting. And
yeah.
So, what did you want to talk about in terms of the Tea Party?
Yeah, and I hope I'm not going to take up too much of your time, but it's a fascinating discussion, and I might disagree with you guys a little bit on one minor point, and I think that's regarding our definition of what the Tea Party is. So for a while, I've been really unsure about what to make of the media, calling this Tea Party thing the Tea Party. Like they're always talking about Tea Party leaders and the Tea Party this and the Tea Party that. And I'm not really so sure that is really a thing. I mean, if you want to talk about what really exists, go ahead.
I'm not sure where you're going with this, but this is exactly what I've been thinking. Is this sort of like, I don't even know why we call these people the Tea Party. They're the Republican base. They are not. And I was contemplating this week about how brilliant the branding of using the word party is, because it makes it seem like it's something separate. It is the Republican base. There's been some change insofar as the way that they're using their tactics, but these are the exact same people I wrote about in FUBAR, which I wrote in 2006 with Stephen Sherrill, I should say. This is the Republican base, and it was beyond predictable. Yeah. Not only was it predictable that they would take over the Republican Party, that's what that book was. It was that prediction. It was not just predictable; it was predicted. And I don't know if that's where you were going, but I agree totally with that sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and that's sort of where I'm going. The only other thing is that, to an extent, there is something. There's the word Tea Party in a few organizations, and if you look at these organizations, they're all corporate front groups and lobbying groups. Essentially, the Tea Party Patriots and the Tea Party Express are just lobbying groups.
Right.
They're professionally staffed as far as I'm aware of. So I mean, and that's the big thing that separates the so-called Tea Party movement from the Occupy movement, was because the rallies, the so-called rallies, which is about the only point where normal, average, everyday people were involved, those were actually entirely staffed by professionals. I mean, they had to get special use permits. They had to buy stage and sound equipment. They had to pay professional acts like Ted Nugent. They had to. They bought like fancy charter buses that probably cost $100,000 a pop, and then did a professional $20,000 paint job on them. With like the Tea Party Patriots bus. I mean, that's something that the Occupy movement didn't have because they didn't have corporate money. So
right.
I think there's definitely a Tea Party thing out there, but let's just call it what it is. They're just lobbying groups.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the Republican base, and to the extent that there's any sort of the the groups are, yes, they're advocacy groups. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with advocacy groups, but it is definitely important to understand who we're talking about. I mean, you know, the big difference in terms of the dynamic is simply that you have an incredibly large amount of money that is coming in to fund the agenda of the base. So the base, and like I say, this was happening in 2006, but it just, it has culminated. But I appreciate the call, and thanks for calling in, Dan.